Hello, and thank you guys for joining us today on the Churches and Nonprofit webinar. I hope you guys find this information valuable. I think you will. We have done a lot of these webinars, but we wanted to do one specifically for nonprofits and churches, just so you guys can see a little bit of a different perspective on how this infinite banking concept can work for you guys. So just thank you for being here. We're going to zip right along, and financial planning for generations, that's kind of the focus. So real quick, this information is not intended as tax or legal advice. We suggest you seek your own tax and legal advice for things. We are going to show you some strategies and things we think are going to be advantageous for you as you find ways to utilize them. But before we dive into that, I want to share a little bit about myself, and I have here Jonathan Wield with me as well. You know, I grew up in a Christian home and church, and it was a really good upbringing. You know, my parents brought me up well in this Christian environment. When I went off to college, my father caught cancer, and he actually passed away when I was 19. That sort of shaped my life a little bit and my trajectory. And moving on, you know, it sort of opened doors. God sort of opened doors for me in certain areas to be exploring things and ideas. And this opened up opportunity for me to go to India 1 year, and I ended up in a village where we were the first foreigners to visit them since the late 1800s. That sort of begat a friend and I started a nonprofit working with tribal villages in Northeast India for about the next 6 years. We were up in the jungles, in and out of the jungles, helping them become better self-sustaining. After that was done, you know, 2008, 9, 10, during that crisis, the economy tanked. So did we as a nonprofit. I sort of got into a project working with Denver's Hidden Homeless, debunking the stereotype of what homelessness is. So I worked with Denver's Road Home here in Denver, their initiative to try to end homelessness. I got married. I got into real estate investing shortly thereafter in lieu of the crisis also. I took out a wife, a kid, a dog, and a cat overnight. And then years later, I was introduced to infinite banking. I was looking for a career change. I was already practicing this, what we're going to show you, and happened upon unbridled wealth, and the rest is history. Here we are. So just kind of a backstory of how my life has lined up. Jonathan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, and thank you guys for joining and giving us your time. I know it's valuable, so I do appreciate it. And I did want to let you know as well, there's a Q&A feature on this webinar. So as we start going through content, if you have questions, feel free to type in that chat feature and ask them, and we'll do our best to answer as we go. If not, we'll certainly do some Q&A at the end. But let me just tell you a brief synopsis of my story and how I got into this business, but also why we're doing a webinar on churches and nonprofits today. So I moved to the US about 12 years ago, actually just in time for that financial crisis, which was fun. That was my first lesson in economics, was watching the Great British Pound lose 35% of its value against the US dollar. So that was good. And so I went to ministry school, originally intended to stay here 9 months, but obviously I have been here ever since. And so shortly after, I moved to Dallas, Texas for a job, and I worked for a not-for-profit from 2010 to 2012. Then I worked for a for-profit from 2012 to 2014. And then in 2014, I moved to Denver, Colorado, which is where we are now, and helped plant a church. And I think that experience for me really opened up my eyes to the sacrifice that specifically pastors make in their careers and in their lives when they begin pastoring a church. So I've been around nonprofits, ministries, and churches. And one of the things I saw was you don't really get time off. It's not a 40-hour-a-week job when you're a pastor. It's 24/7. And so I had this theory of if somebody commits their whole life to the church, I think the church should pay them for their whole life. That was just a belief I had, especially as they're usually not paid very well. And so that definitely became a mission of mine, and that bumped me into Unbridled Wealth. So it's actually in about 2015, we started learning about this infinite banking concept and the power of using it in individuals and families and businesses. But I think one of the most powerful applications is inside of a nonprofit. And so discovering that you could actually use this vehicle owned by a nonprofit and use it to do things like pay down debts as a savings account, as a building fund often, and it can even be like a retirement account for whether it's the executive director or the pastor, or depending on what type of nonprofit organization it is. So I've been the managing partner of Unbridled Wealth now since 2018, and it's definitely a good part of our focus is how can we come alongside and help and be advocates for nonprofits and churches. So really, that's why we're here today. But Jason, why don't you jump into just give us an overview of what we're going to talk about?
So Unbridled Wealth, we call ourselves private banking systems experts, designing personalized strategies for individuals, families, businesses, nonprofits, through education, conversation, discovery. We craft custom strategies for our clients using what's called the infinite banking concept. So stick with us. We're going to kind of preface this a little bit with some information, which is important to kind of give you the foundation. So stick with us the first half, and we're going to really dive into some good examples and case studies for the second half, which I think you'll really enjoy. So if some authoritative power distributed all the money in the world equally among all the people in the world, within 10 years' time, 97% of all the money would be back under control of 3% of the people. Well, why is that? Well, that's because they understand money and how to get it to flow to and towards them instead of away from them. And that's kind of one thing we want to show you today is how do we get this, especially during these times of COVID, how do we get this money problem sorted out a little bit as best we can? How do we get it to protect ourselves, when we hit times like this next time, because there may be a next time, we can't, we hope there's never a next time, there always is.
Yeah.
And that's really what we want to, our goal, I think, as a business and as individuals is just teaching people, how to get this money flowing back towards them instead of away from them.
Yeah. And I think one of the things we've discovered in this journey is really the mindset and the education around money is the most important part. It's the most important aspect. And like you said, these events, whether it's COVID or 2008, the financial crisis, or 2001 and 9/11, it happens as the black swan events that happen usually every 10 years. And those who make it through it usually have been preparing before that event happens. And so what we've learned is really there's three types of people in this world, or I should say mindsets around money. There's the debtor. So meaning those who are usually getting into debt and then getting back to zero. So a great example would be, okay, you buy a car, you've got a 5-year debt, and you're going to keep making that payment until you get to zero. But then after 5 years, you get down to zero, you have no payment, and you go out and buy another car, and you go back into debt and repeat the cycle. Constantly going into debt and getting back to zero. And that's, I would say, probably the most prevalent one in our culture today, that we are a finance culture. We're a credit culture. That if you can't afford it, just finance it. Then you have on the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got the savers. So if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, it'd be this kind of theory that you see debt as bad, and therefore you're going to save up and you'll pay cash and often get back to zero. And again, not going to be critical of necessarily either one of these as good aspects to each of them, but overall, you're still getting back to zero. And then finally, we say is the wealth creator. And so these are the people that understand how to either use savings or use debt to their advantage. They may understand that they could have a loss of access today, but they're looking for long-term growth, not short-term wins. And I think it's something that's actually pretty foreign in our culture today, but really, really needed and essential. And so it's part of what we want to do is help talk and teach concepts around money and around finances.
So do you think the saver would be a lot like churches and nonprofits? We're
Oh, yeah.
constantly having to raise funds, for certain needs, and then you spend them, you go back to zero. You raise again, spend them, go back to zero. Things like that.
Yeah, which is why you're often in that constant cycle of. I was actually at a charity golf event yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
It's the constantly I heard a statistic. It's like more than 2/3 of time and money in your average nonprofit is spent fundraising, right? And so part of that is, and obviously it depends on the length of the nonprofit and their giving, etc. But a lot of that is due to this mindset of looking short term instead of long term. So we say those three types of people live in three types of lands. So there's the land of not enough, just enough, and more than enough. And so I guess our goal here at Unbridled Wealth is it's just saying that whichever land you're in, we want to come alongside you and be an advocate. If you're in the land of not enough, we want to help you get to just enough. Likewise, if you're in just enough to more than enough, and if you're in the land of more than enough today, especially as a nonprofit, where maybe you don't have the ability to go invest in the stock market or real estate, but you care about legacy and long-term sustainability for your nonprofit, we have strategies that can help you do that. So Jason, do you want to walk through just some of the aspects of infinite banking or the benefits of infinite banking?
Yeah, so I like to say, would you, if you could, as an individual or a business, say, receive things like tax-free growth, tax-free distributions, long-term care benefits while you're at it, creditor protection, collateral opportunity, a safe harbor for your money, right? Guaranteed loan options, unstructured loans, meaning you take a loan and it's structured however you'd like it to be structured, more or less. Liquidity, use control of your money, deductible interest for businesses. Most people say, well, yeah, I would love all of that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we want to do, is show you how this can be done through a particular vehicle for utilizing the infinite banking concept. Now, I kind of like to pause here real quick and say, a lot of people have heard different variants of this. IBC is the short, we always call it, be your own banker, maybe a variant of this, velocity banking,
privatized banking.
Yeah. So you hear lots of different variants of this, and I really genuinely believe what we're showing you is really it's this at its core, right? Not really adding any fluff around it. We don't have dollar amounts in mind. We don't have this kind of stuff. We're just kind of showing you what it is, the best vehicle through which to use it, and how it can work for you. So infinite banking concept. I want to show you, how an entity accumulated $225,000 inside of a policy, and then using it along the way. It's not just a savings account, and then how they were able to make that grow over $500,000 in cash. That's just one little example. And fundamentally, it works the same no matter how many zeros are on it.
Yeah. And when you say policy, what are you talking about by policy?
Yeah. So the best vehicle is a properly structured, dividend-paying whole life insurance policy from a mutual insurance company. Was that for a mouthful?
Yeah, we're gonna have to say that one again. So the vehicle that we are using for the strategy and this concept is a whole life insurance policy. And like Jason said, it's a properly structured one. So not two whole life insurance policies are not the same. It really does depend on how you design the policy. But a lot of people ask us, why whole life insurance? Why not use an IRA or a savings account or a CD or etc. And so I just wanted to tell you why, because look, we get it. We know that there's a stigma around whole life insurance. You just have to Google it or listen to Susie Orman or Dave Ramsey, and they're going to tell you that it's junk and you should just buy term and invest the difference. But whole life insurance has been the most effective vehicle we can find. The reason being, it grows in a guaranteed fashion and with uninterrupted compounding. So meaning it's going to grow and compound for the rest of your life, for your whole life. You still have access to it even while it's growing. And so you can access the cash from a whole life policy without stopping it from growing, which is a super unique ability that the policy has. And then finally, there's tax advantages. Now with nonprofits, obviously, there's usually not tax consequences. You're not a taxable entity. And so what that means is with whole life insurance, we can actually just structure it in a way that's way more beneficial for the entity than versus like a non-profit or a for-profit or an S-corp or C-corp. So we're going to go through that today. But again, it's to us, the really important aspect is that we're designing it in such a way and using a mutual insurance carrier, meaning a carrier where you as the policyholder, so if the nonprofit owns a policy with the mutual carrier, the nonprofit is technically an owner of that mutual insurance carrier, meaning that you receive dividends into your whole life policy or profit share from the mutual carrier.
And it's a little bit different from a stock company.
Yeah.
So like the interests of a stock company are in the stockholders versus maybe the policy holders in this case, right? And so as a mutual carrier, it's mutually owned, right? So that's kind of how I like to see it. It's a little bit different, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and another reason we like it is it's been around a really long time. This isn't some new strategy of like get rich quick. Whole life insurance has been around more than 250 years. And interestingly enough, we discovered, and this was actually after we were already working with churches, that it was actually created by the Presbyterian Church to take care of its pastors and their families. So it was originally called the Corporation for Relief of Poor and Distressed Presbyterian Ministers.
And that's actually the short version of it.
Yeah. So it makes sense that they changed it to whole life. But Jason, that's just some about why we use whole life insurance, but can you just tell us some of the people that use whole life insurance? Maybe that'll show some credibility.
Yeah, so with these companies, for example, carry billions of dollars in cash value whole life insurance. They're able to insure employees, to name one, and utilize the cash value along the way. I don't want to camp here. These Fortune 500 companies, they understand it. They're using it. Fun story, Walt Disney, 1955, unable to secure a large enough loan to build a theme park in California.
Yeah.
Utilized the cash value from his policy to help finance the creation of this theme park called, right, Disneyland. McDonald's, so Ray Kroc, who bought out his partners, the McDonald brothers, he used cash value from 2 different policies to pay some key employees to get started, and he also used the funds to start his new marketing campaign for his newest mascot,
Ronald McDonald.
Ronald McDonald.
It's a good return on investment.
That's right. That's right. So every time you see Ronald McDonald now, you think of cash value whole life insurance.
There you go.
Who else knows about this? These dignitaries used it and use it. There's an interesting article on Joe Biden talking about how he actually owns 0 investments and 6 whole life policies.
Yeah.
And I like how they talk about here his cash value life insurance policies have become important assets and continue to grow tax-free, and they'll probably remain so even if tax rates increase. And it goes on to talk about how he's tapped into these multiple times.
Yeah, and I think that's relevant as well because even the tax benefits, you never know. Often you never know when tax law is going to change. Mm-hmm. But the fact that every bank, every Fortune 500, and really every president has whole life, pretty unlikely they're going to change the tax laws.
Right. Yeah. So we've talked about insurance here. I kind of want to stop here and define the terms. Yeah. No pun intended here. Okay. Yeah, term life insurance, as you see at the top, that's what most people are familiar with. You pay a premium, you get a death benefit. So that's your premium and your insurance, right? Whole life, if you walked into a insurance carrier off the street and said, hey, I need a whole life policy, if you paid the same amount of premium, your death benefit would be significantly less in contrast to term. But at some point in the life of the policy, you would get cash value. So that's people's understanding of whole life, generally speaking, and they usually say, well, it's not worth it.
Yeah,
Right? I
and
put all this
or
money
it's just
into
for
it
the
and-
rich.
Yeah, yeah. I get some cash value at some point in the life of the policy. Now, what we're doing is we're taking this typical whole life insurance structure at the top and we're beefing it up, as I say, and introducing what's called paid up additions. The paid up additions magnify the cash value and the insurance of a policy. So it comes from the dividends that we talked about a little bit and personal contributions. So that's all assigned to the paid up addition portion of the policy. So your premium plus your PUAs buys more insurance, thus giving you more immediate access and greater access to cash value. So with us, it's having cash year one instead of at some point in the life of the policy, right? Like most people understand it to be, well, year 1 or 10 or something, right? I get some cash and that's nice. But what we're doing, the way we're structuring it is you get access to cash now.
Right away. Yep.
Yeah. You want to detail that out a little bit for us?
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to jump over and do a virtual whiteboard as you guys are not with us here in person, like I usually prefer. I'll do the virtual version. So let's just walk through the policy design that we're talking about, because to me, the design of your whole life policy is probably the most important aspect of the policy. And honestly, if you're hearing critics talking about whole life and why it would be better to buy term or why this is just expensive insurance, they're referring to whole life insurance that's designed in a way that is less efficient for you, the owner of the policy. And a big part of that reason is they're often designed where the commissions are the highest, and so the person selling the insurance is getting the largest payout. Yet at Unbridled Wealth, we sat on your side of the table just 5 years ago to where we were clients of this strategy and clients of this product. And so we always design it in the same way that we design it for ourselves. So let me just talk about that just for a minute. So like Jason said, we've got 3 aspects of the policy. Premium, so how much you're paying each year. Cash value, so this is how much access to cash that you have. And then the death benefit, which obviously gets paid out to the beneficiary when the insured person dies. So whether we're talking about a policy that's owned by you as an individual or even owned by a nonprofit, you still have an insured person. So let's just take a hypothetical example, and let's say you have a nonprofit and they're paying $10,000 a year in premium into a whole life policy, and maybe it's on the executive director. So this $10,000 is going to be made up of those 2 things that Jason mentioned: the base premium and the paid up additions, or PUAs. So paid up additions, so you can see what I'm saying. And we're going to split. So the amount we can split this ratio is usually restricted if we didn't want it to be a taxable event. If it's going to be owned by a nonprofit, obviously we don't have those same restrictions. So let's just say, for example, that we're going to do 20% in the base and 80% in paid up additions. So that means a couple of things. It means each year the nonprofit would have the option to pay in a minimum of $2,000, so 20%, up to a total of $10,000. So these PUAs, or paid up additions, are a flexible, optional payment into the policy. So let's just say, hypothetically, year 1, you pay in $10,000. What that's going to mean is your cash value, your access to cash, is about $8,000. Okay, so this is the money you have available to you. So think you just transferred it from your savings account with Wells Fargo, you paid it into your policy, and now you've got this account with the mutual insurance carrier with $8,000 in it. And you would have created, I don't know, it depends, age, health, gender, that kind of thing, but maybe it's let's say it's a $200,000 death benefit. So your $2,000 cost expense, that's what you lost the first year, created a $200,000 death benefit, which this is going to grow now every year for the rest of your life. So let's skip to year 2. Again, you could put in anywhere between $2,000 and $10,000. And if you did a larger policy, so let's say it's a $100,000 a year policy, it would just follow the same ratio. So you could do between 20 and 100,000. But sticking with this example, say you did $10,000, your cash value is going to go up by right about $10,000. So now you're going to have $18,000 in cash value, and maybe your death benefit went up to 240,000. So what this tells us is even by year 2, your cash value is growing by the equivalent of what you're paying in premium, which means your cost of insurance has been overcome by the growth in the cash value. So let me just quickly tell you how the cash value grows. So this cash value is going to receive a guaranteed 4% rate of return. And this year it was 5%, right?
Yep.
So 5%. So with dividends, we keep mentioning these dividends. So as the insurance carrier makes money, turns a profit, it gets paid out to the policyholders. So this year they actually paid out 5% on their cash value, which is actually the lowest they've ever paid out.
Now, well, I think a lot of people start asking questions at this point. Is this then an investment product?
Yeah, great question. Because yeah, we want to be clear. This is not an investment. This is a life insurance contract. We would say this is an asset, not an investment. So this would be an asset of the nonprofit. If it was a business that owns it, it would be an asset of the corporation. It does happen to be an asset that grows at a guaranteed rate, which is obviously a good thing. And just to be clear as well, the growth on this policy is before your cost of insurance. So you can see in year 1, you have $8,000. It grew by, let's say it's 5%. And then after your cost of insurance, it meant that it just grew by the premium you paid in the next year. We skip 10 years down the road, and now you've got a large portion of money in your cash value, and it's going to be growing by significantly more than your cost of insurance. So that's really where you start seeing the power of whole life. And again, I know I'm going to go over a pretty complex subject, and I'm trying to make it simple and communicate it in a short period of time. So if you have questions, again, feel free to shoot them in the Q&A. But let me just skip forward another number of years and show you why we use this vehicle and why we actually do the infinite banking concept. So let's speak hypothetically. Let's say you're 10 years into the policy, you paid in $10,000 a year, and your cash value is now, it's going to be around $120,000. Okay, so this is the money, and your death benefit, let's say it's $400,000.
And you've only paid in about $100,000.
100, yeah. So yeah, we'd have maybe it's a 20% return after 10 years, which again, it's not super exciting, but it's better than Wells Fargo and what's being paid out there. But you still have access to this money. So the way that it works is, let's say this was a church that's doing it. That's probably the nonprofits I know the best. And you wanted to do some renovations on the church building. And so let's say you're like, okay, we need $100,000. We're going to do some renovations. We're going to take out a loan. So this loan against your cash value is completely unstructured, meaning there's no application, there's no credit score, there's no closing costs, and they don't even define how you have to pay it back. But you are going to pay an interest rate. So if you do it directly through the carrier, you're going to pay about 5%. That is the max that you will pay. And you can even go to a traditional bank and loan against your cash value there, which at the moment they're doing it for about 3.5%. So let's put it in the middle. Let's say your loan cost is going to be 4%. So the best way to utilize this policy, this concept is every time you're borrowing money, we recommend that you put yourself back on a repayment plan. Again, you don't have to. If you need a break, you need a gap, you want to do interest only for a while, that's totally fine. But let's just follow the example and say you borrowed $100,000 at 4% and you're going to pay it back over 10 years. You will have paid an interest. Oh, I'm going to have to do some quick math. It's going to be about it'll be about $13,000, $14,000 in interest. So let's say 14,000, we'll round up. So this was your cost, right? So this was the expense for borrowing your own money. And so you may be asking the question, why would I pay interest to use my own money? And here's the key. And to me, this is the key to the infinite banking concept. Even though you used your $100,000 over here, your $120,000, the entire amount is still earning at this rate up here. So let's just say it was earning at that same 4%. So in year 1, it would have earned $4,800. A year 2, it's earning 4% of 124,800, right? So a year 2, it's going to be earning about 5,000. A year 3, it's going to be earning, 5,300. That's going to keep compounding. So over 10 years, your policy will have actually grown by about $60,000 growth. So if I told you, hey, you can use $100,000 of your money and not pay any interest but not earn anything, or you can use $100,000 of your money, it's going to cost you $14,000, but it will grow by $60,000 at the same time, which deal would you want to take?
Yeah.
Let alone the fact that you got a death benefit. When you're not using it, it's still growing. There's disability benefits and all the other things that come along with that. So that's, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, and it just shows the security of what's behind it. It's not an investment product, one.
Right.
2, the uninterrupted growth component. So another way to look at it would be if you had okay, it's just a savings account. If your organization is piling up money in the savings account, let's say you got a really good 2% return. So you get the 100,000 saved up for a project, and you borrow, or let's say you spend the 100,000. Now what's growing in that savings account is $0 off of 2%.
Exactly.
Right. So if you had $100,000 inside of a policy and you borrowed the 100,000, it's still growing as if there were $100,000 in there.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because that's a really hard thing for us to wrap our heads around, because that never usually happens.
Right.
And that's why it's like, why would I pay interest? But it's because of that very reason that you get the growth inside of your policy.
Yep. So I like Yogi Berra. You've got to be very careful. Don't know where you're going, because you might not get there.
Yeah.
So that's why when we talk, there's not a blanket approach to this. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach to this. It is very personalized, very much based on you and your situation, your organization's situation, where you at, where you want to go, what your staffing look like, what's the church's needs and goals, what's the nonprofit's needs and goals, what kinds of big things do you have coming up. So we work with you on that, your goals and objectives, what's the financial situation, and just get a full snapshot so we can make appropriate recommendations based on that, and then it's up to you to implement it. Let's dive in. Let's do a real basic illustration on just an individual, and then kind of show you smaller dollars, right? I think that first one we were talking a couple $100,000 in dollars, but sometimes that freaks people out. So just this is an example of one person, so you can get context of what one person can do, and just imagine what an organization can do.
Yeah. And after this, we'll also do a case study of a nonprofit using this strategy as well.
Yep. So in this case, we had a 25-year-old client. He's making 46 grand a year, $200,000 townhouse, 800,000 in debt, big truck payment, bunch of student loan debt. So again, it was work with him. What is his situation? What is his goals? He said, hey, time I'm in my 50s, I'd like $1 million in cash value available.
Yeah.
And so we kind of reverse engineer that, and what does that look like for him? So in his case, he was set up a policy where he would put $20,000 a year in for 20 years. That's the base plus paid up addition. The base is about $6,000.
Yeah, $500 a month.
Yep. So then after the 20 years, we drop the paid up addition portion, and then it's $6,000 a year thereafter. I'll show you a graph on this and how it looks. A lot of people ask at this point, how is a kid making 46 grand a year coming up with 20 grand a year?
It's a valid question.
That's the first question I asked when I first saw this.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. That's where we work with you on coming up with ideas, right? That's where we work with you in understanding your situation. Going, well, this may be the way to get there, but can you get there? Or are there things you can change to get there, right? So in his case, he ended up getting a roommate, saved $800 a month, changed his mode of transportation for work, got the credit card actually, I think, recaptured inside the policy, and traded in the truck for Jetta, which in turn also saved him on gas. That actually equated to about 21 grand a
let me just comment on the credit card one for a second, because this is a great example of it. So in that first year, he had about $14,000 in cash value. And so he took an $8,000 loan, paid off his credit card, for which he was paying 23% in interest. And then now accrued a 3% interest, which obviously a much better savings. But that money is still earning inside of his policy.
Yeah.
So he just went from a hugely negative interest rate to a positive one.
Yep. So what's that really look like? So I'm going to show you, we're going to focus on the yellow line first, down at the bottom, the 20,000. So it's cumulative 20,000. The second year, you put in another 20, so that's 40. Next year, 60. Next year, 80. Okay, so that's cumulative, not how much per year. Year one, 20,000 in. Remember, we said you can get cash value right away. So he's got about 14,000 of cash value accessible as soon as that 20's in. I'm going to address the death benefit early on, but we're not really going to talk about it for the rest of this illustration. But he's kicking it off with a $916,000 death benefit. And then it just keeps growing from there. So year two, year three, year four, 80,000. Now, a lot of people go, wait a minute. We got 80,000 in, but only 66 available in cash value to borrow against. That doesn't sound like a very good deal to me. And I said, now wait a minute. Let's look back up a year. He had 44,400 in cash. He put 20,000 in. How much did it grow? More or less than 20,000?
It's more. 21.5, yeah.
Yeah. So in his case, by year 3 or 4, it starts growing. The cash value is growing more than he's putting in. I think on average, between year 2 and 3, that's the way we structure them. And then move on down the line. In his case, by the time he's 34, he's got $200,000 in total over the life of the policy, 222,000 almost available to borrow against. And he's using it along the way. This money is not tied up in there. So that's the important thing. That's what's big about this. This is not a savings account where the money's stuck in there, right?
Yeah.
Use it along the way. Borrow, pay it back, borrow, pay it back, Now, his goal, time I'm in my 50s, $1 million. He had 53,000 that he put in, 1.1 million in cash available to borrow against. So we got him there to his goal. We said, hey, that's not it. Look, all the way to retirement, by the time you're in your 70s, you'll have a little over $500,000 in, 2.6 available to borrow against.
Yeah, amazing.
Plus this whopping death benefit, $4.4 million death benefit. The math of this happens to be about where he could pretty much be pulling out $125,000 a year for retirement for the rest of his life, not have to pay it back. Death benefit would pay it back. I want to show you one more thing. Look at the growth. Remember we said we're paying the PUA 20 years and then dropping it. So from age 44 to age 49, he only paid $26,425. You can see it goes from 400 to 426. He paid $26,000 and the policy grew by $210,000.
Yeah.
So I was joking, I'm like, hey, would you pay $26,000 to make 200? I mean,
sure hope
all
so.
day long.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but the thing is, it's just this velocity that you're creating. It's not like Jonathan said earlier, this is not a get rich quick scheme. This is a long-term game. Plan. In churches, long-term gain, you better believe it. And nonprofits, you don't set these things up to run for a couple of years and be out, These organizations are around for generations, hopefully, if they're doing good, and you want to set them up that way. So again, functionally, it works the same no matter how many zeros are on it. We kick it over to Jonathan, a few different applications of it.
Yeah.
Give you another case study on specifically a church, right?
Yep.
And how they're using it.
Yeah, I also want to just quickly comment on this one, because the fascinating thing about this young man who bought the policy, he was trying to take care of an issue of retirement income. And I think he's actually pretty unsure whether Social Security will still be around by the time he's in his 70s. But like Jason mentioned, at age 70, he's put in 537 and he's got $2.6 million. But you'll notice in this 1 year, so you see age 69 to 70, that the policy actually grew by just over $130,000. And so we basically said to him, hey, when you're in your late 60s, early 70s, and you can do this at any time, but just for the sake of this example, you could take out 10 grand a month, tax-free, and use it as your retirement income. Plus, still get to leave behind, about $4 million for your kids. It's just a great way to utilize a strategy where you're using it along the way, but then also towards the end of your life, you get the benefit of supplementing your retirement or even funding your retirement income. So we just wanted to show you this as an example. This is actually one of our clients made this. He liked to have a different policy for each different area of his life. So he had his fund, he had his children's fund, his investment fund, his retained earnings. He happened to be a business owner. He used it to pass mortgages through a policy so he could build that asset, and then an endowment fund, which he was using for, paying for some nonprofit stuff. He actually owns a nonprofit, and they use a whole life policy to fund various ventures that they do. Also this is a great example for the people it benefits, especially if it's owned by a business. It works as well with a nonprofit, but banks like it, because if you ever have debt with a bank and a key person is insured, they know they're taken care of if something happens to them. The shareholders like it. In this case, it could be the congregants or the members of a nonprofit, because they know long-term that it's going to be sustainable, because not only do they have access to the money, they've got the death benefit one day. The business likes it, the teammates like it, and the clients like it. So there's nobody who does not benefit. So we believe we're really creating a win-win with this strategy. So we say we either use velocity or we lose velocity. So just really teaching nonprofits, churches, businesses how to use that velocity. Okay, so I'm going to go through one final case study, and then we'll open up to if there are any questions. Again, we appreciate you sticking with us and your time. So this was the example of, could a church use this strategy and then use the whole life policy to fund the pastor's retirement while still getting paid back? Right. So here's how it works. We did this as an example. It was on a 43-year-old pastor in Texas, and we wanted to see if the church could start paying him a retirement salary when he turns 65 and pay it for the rest of his life, no matter how long he lived. So in this example, the church paid $100,000 a year into the policy for 10 years. And we appreciate that's a lot of money, but they would still have access even in year one to $80,000. So really their loss of access, if you wish, was about $20,000. And by year 5, for sure by year 6, they have access to all of their money back. So it's not like they can't use it and can't use it along the way. But if you see by year 10, they've put in $1 million and they've got about $1.1 million in cash value. So again, not a tremendous return, but there's a $3.8 million death benefit. So this is really what's going to allow this strategy to work. So we're going to skip down the road. Pastor turns 65. So that means we're 22 years into the policy. We have a $2.28 million cash value, $4.5 million death benefit, and I wanted the pastor to receive a 75 grand retirement salary for the rest of his life. If you've been around churches and nonprofits, you'd understand that's pretty rare. So this would be a incredible offering for the pastor. So I ran the numbers, whether he lives till 67 or he lives till 115, it still works. Not only does the church get paid back, they actually make money. So let's just assume the pastor dies at age 95, meaning he was retired for 30 years. The church in the entire life of the policy would have paid out 1.7 million, of which they had access to most, if not all of it, the entire time. They would have paid the pastor $2.25 million in salary. And then when the pastor dies, they would have got $5 million back. Okay, let that sink in for a second. So church pays 1.7 into a policy. The pastor receives 2.25 million in retirement. Then the church gets $5 million back. So they tripled their money while paying a salary for 30 years. Which, I don't know about you, I think that's a super cool strategy. And really, this is a way that a nonprofit or a church could take care of their people while being sustainable for generations to come. So Jason, do you want to just walk us through that menu of services of what we offer our clients?
Yeah, a lot of different things, from businesses and nonprofit standpoint, we can help out with, if it's applicable, your business valuations, buy, sell, succession planning, things like that. If you have employees, some long-term disability options, group life benefit options. And then from the individual perspective, it gives you asset protection, obviously life insurance, income protection, education planning, retirement planning, financial planning. So there's just a whole slew of things that we've kind of encompass. And we don't come out and try to say, well, let's see what we can do for you in the succession planning thing. It's more of that collective
Holistic planning.
Yeah, that this stuff comes up, and if it's applicable, we're going to try to recommend it, or at least show you options. And then, of course, the main thing is infinite banking through your own private banking system. That is what we do. That is what we are passionate about, and what we love helping people set up and seeing the light bulb come on and go, this is going to be amazing. Use it, and it's really fun to see that happen for people once you really drill down and come up with some hard numbers for them or their organization or their business and see what it can do for them.
Yeah, so we're going to answer any questions that have come in as well. I know we've only got a little less than 10 minutes left. If you do have questions and you're still listening, then feel free to shoot those over to us. But wanted to let you know next steps. If you are interested in learning more or just doing a discovery, whether it's for you individually or for your nonprofit, then reach out to Jason and set up a free consultation. Yep. And he's more than happy to meet with you, and we can sit down and create a strategy specifically for you.
We work with clients nationwide, so don't feel like whatever state you're watching from, you might not be able to do it, but we're working with people in nearly every state. We have that capability.
Yep. So okay, question for you, Jason. So how do we know that we can trust the insurance company? If you've got that much money into the policy, how do we know that the company is not going to go bankrupt?
Most of the carriers are, or I should say all the carriers, let me come at it from a different angle. Banks close in droves, and your money can go with it if it's above that FDIC. Even the FDIC coverage is less than the total deposits anyway.
For sure.
So your bank is not committed. So from the life insurance companies, they are backed by assets. So they have liquid assets equal to the death benefit amounts. So they cannot not come up with the money. They're not allowed to, like banks, add some zeros that don't exist.
Yeah. Fractional reserve banking.
Yeah, banks. If you look at fractional reserve banking, that's what's happening, and they have to have it backed up. And the stuff that their money is put into is pretty safe. Even right now, with COVID going on, while it's a little bit harder, they're still ahead of the game.
Yep. Yeah. Haven't lost any investments in that. Yep. Okay. Another question. Is there a minimum that you can pay into a policy each year?
There is officially no minimum. We don't have a minimum price in mind for you. There's no buy-in. There's no, it's going to be based on you and your situation, your organization and its situation. We have clients, $200 a month, up to, $20,000 a month or something. We got people, a whole spread of clients that are putting money in. And so it really truly is what is your situation and your capability.
Okay. Okay. Is there an age that is too old to get started in this strategy?
Not necessarily. It can be, but that depends on your health. And I think one of our guys just got somebody in their low 70s, mid 70s in underwriting.
Yeah, 72, I think.
72, yeah. So not really. It's just going to depend on your cost of insurance will vary based on age and health.
Yeah.
But
I've worked with gosh, I think it was a 68-year-old pastor in New Jersey. And it's not going to look as good as the 43-year-old pastor example I gave, but it was the idea of like, I don't know if you heard the saying, the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago, the second best time is today.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not too late, but you want to get started as soon as you can.
Yep.
And so for him, he already had a succession plan. He was going to retire in 5 years. So we were going to get his retirement taken care of, but then also setting it up like we had showed you for the generational benefit of the pastors afterwards.
One church I was talking to was discussing, they had some big remodeling projects, expansion projects coming up. They were saving up for, and then they also have, which a lot of churches, I can't say most anymore these days, unfortunately, but a lot actually have a reserve, right?
Yeah.
And so you're just sitting on that money. And how long will that reserve be a reserve? And we don't know, right? Every 10 years or so, you maybe dip into it realistically, but they were discussing, what kind of safe investments to put their money in, right? And that's the mindset, right? That's what we're taught from day one about money is invest the difference, right? As some say, and get it in safe investments, but really, all investments have some variant of risk, right?
Yeah.
And to get it into something, if it's going to be sitting in a reserve, sitting in a savings account for a long period of time, why not get it into something that is safe, it's going to grow, that you can access when you need it, and it's going to do multiple things at once.
Yeah.
It's not just there. It's still going to grow even when you pull some of it out, right?
Yeah, that's so true. Okay, we're just about to come up on time, so if anybody else has any other questions, I'll say this is last call for questions. So if you want to shoot them over to us. If not, then again, thank you for joining us today. And I truly encourage you, there's no cost to set up a meeting with us. So reach out to Jason, shoot him an email, and we'll schedule a time and talk through your specific situation. And we'd love to be an advocate for you and help you create a strategy. So,
thanks for being on, guys. I appreciate it. And, appreciate your time. And please reach out, and we'll set up a time to chat.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.